Welcome to Echoes of the Lost audiobook, where forgotten stories come to life. Dive into worlds of mystery, survival, and the unknown. If you enjoy our stories, don't forget to like and subscribe to stay updated with our latest audiobooks. Chap 47, Stalker in the Shadows. Ryder crouched low, crawling slowly across the cold metal floor of the gas forge, his right hand tracing the smooth surface, feeling the vibrations from the central machine behind, a deep, powerful thrum now laced with sharp metallic whines like an unending warning. White smoke poured from pipes on the ceiling and walls, so thick the square chamber became a foggy maze, the faint light barely illuminating dangling broken panels and rusted, mottled walls. The stench of sulfur mixed with burnt metal clogged the air, heavy and stifling, each breath through his nose cloth like a small blade in his chest. Lena crawled beside him, her crude spear in her right hand scraping the floor with a faint squeak, her sharp eyes slicing through the smoke, tense but steady, a hunter in the dark. Torin crawled behind, one arm supporting Mira, the young girl breathing faintly through her grade filter, her breaths ragged, her pale face showing faint resolve amid exhaustion. Kalia brought up the rear, her left hand gripping her broken wooden stick, her right holding a jagged metal shard, her gaze fixed on the right corner of the room, where the smoke thinned, carrying a hot metal scent she'd caught, a fragile trace guiding them through the lethal testing ground of Archive. The tank of clean air was a memory now, its last cool breath gone, and the Seraphim, the hidden controllers, had turned the smoke into a trap, forcing them to find the trace to survive. He pulled the Seraphim device from his bag, its red light blinking rapidly on the cold metal surface, the small screen showing a curt message, Archive, Ryder, trace is near. Live or die, no time left. The words echoed in his mind, cold and unrelenting, carrying the final weight. The clean air was gone, and the trace was their only hope. He opened his notebook, its pages crumpled and gray, his fingers brushing the rough surface as he wrote slowly, Day 32 North, inside gas forge. Archive Phase 4, tank empty, trace near, where? He paused, his dark brown eyes narrowing through the smoke, peering at the right corner Kalia had pointed to, unease rising like poison seeping through cracks. Trace is near, he muttered, his low, hoarse voice blending with the machine's thrum, but why do I feel hunted? He inhaled lightly through his cloth, analyzing the smoke scent, sulfur still thick, but the hot metal scent sharper now, like the breath of another machine or something more alive. Lena turned to him, her spear upright, her eyes flashing with caution and suspicion. You hear that? She asked, her voice rough, ducking lower to peer through the smoke. Something's there, not the machine. She frowned, her hand tightening on the spear's haft, her gaze sweeping the right corner, where the smoke thinned but a shadow flickered, like a phantom in the toxic haze. Trace, or trap? She took a short breath, wincing as the smoke hit, but held her resolve, her hand ready to strike anything that emerged. Ryder nodded, pausing, kneeling on one knee, his right hand pressing the floor to feel the vibrations, not just the central machines, but another rhythm, slower, heavier, like footsteps moving through the smoke. Not the machine, he said, his voice low but taut, his eyes narrowing as he stared at the corner. Something's in here, alive. He inhaled lightly through his cloth, analyzing the hot metal scent, now tinged with a faint tang, like dried blood or charred flesh, tightening his chest. The trace isn't an exit, it's this. He scribbled fast in his notebook, hot metal plus tang, strange vibrations, something in smoke? He turned to the group, his voice low but clear, careful, something stalking us. Stay close, don't split. Torin looked up, his cloudy eyes flickering with fear at Ryder's words. Alive? He asked, his voice slow and shaky, his arm tightening around Mira as if to shield her from an unseen threat. Mira took a short breath, the wheezing in her throat louder, her face bone-white, her small hands trembling as they gripped the useless filter. "I hear breathing," she whispered, her voice faint but sharp, looking toward the corner, her weary eyes tense. Kalia ducked lower, her jagged metal shard upright in her right hand, her gaze locked on the corner, where the smoke thinned, revealing a tall, shadowy figure moving slowly through the toxic haze. "It's there," she said, her voice soft but keen, her hand tightening on her wooden stick, her eyes never leaving the shadow. Not a machine, too slow, too heavy. She took a quick breath, grimacing as the tangy smoke hit her, triggering a faint cough, but she held her vigilance, ready to face it. Ryder frowned, rising slowly, his left hand clutching his notebook, his right slipping into his bag for the sharp metal shard he always carried, his eyes fixed on the shadow in the smoke. Suddenly, a low growl rumbled from the corner, not loud, but deep, vibrating through the smoke, shattering the forge's eerie silence. The central machine's thrum faded for a moment, overtaken by heavy, deliberate footsteps advancing toward them. Through the haze, a shape emerged, tall, distorted, with long, gaunt legs, a hunched body, and two malformed arms stretching out like scythes. Red eyes blazed through the smoke, unblinking, like twin fires in the dead land, and a wide, gaping mouth lined with jagged teeth exhaled a foul, tangy breath into the toxic air. "Monster," he whispered, his voice low, his chest tightening as he realized the Seraphim's trace wasn't an escape, it was their hunter. He wrote quickly, his hands shaky, "Mutant monster, red eyes, in smoke, trace is it?" The Seraphim device buzzed hard, its red light flashing like an alarm, and the cold, deep voice crackled through the speaker, "Ryder, the trace is your trial. Survive it, or fall to it, no way out." The voice cut off, but the monster's growl roared again, closer, paired with heavy footsteps slamming the metal floor. Ryder froze, his eyes widening, his chest tightening as the human tone hit again. The Seraphim had turned the forge into an arena, and this creature was the final test. He turned to the group, his voice taut, "It's the trace, no running, we fight. Get ready." Lena gripped her spear tighter, her eyes flashing with anger and resolve. "Trial?" she echoed, her voice dropping low, standing and crouching, her spear aimed at the monster. "They threw this in to kill us." She took a short breath through her cloth, peering at the shadow through the smoke, her hand poised to strike anything that came near. Torin pulled Mira closer, his voice trembling, "Fight that thing how?" Mira looked up, her weary eyes sharp despite her frailty. "If it's a trial, we have to live," she whispered, her voice faint but fierce, her hand clutching the useless filter, her gaze locked on the monster. Kalia stood, her metal shard upright, her eyes fixed on the monster's blazing red eyes. "It's slow, we can be faster," she said, her voice soft, crouching low, her hand tightening on her wooden stick, her gaze tense but trusting. Ryder watched the monster advance through the smoke, its red eyes like flames, its low growl rumbling again. "Fast and smart," he said, his voice low, pulling the sharp metal shard from his bag, his eyes blazing. "They want a trial? We'll show them we survive." The group closed ranks, crouching low, ready to face the stalker in the shadows of the dead land. Chap 48, Weapons from Scrap. Ryder crouched low, his back against a broken metal panel dangling from the gas forge's wall, his right hand gripping a sharp metal shard, his eyes locked on the mutant monster's shadowy form in the thick white smoke ahead. The central machine's deep thrum rumbled behind, laced with sharp metallic whines, but now drowned by the creature's low, resonant growl, a sound vibrating through the smoke, weighting the square chamber's stifling air even more. Dense smoke poured from pipes on the ceiling and walls, carrying a pungent mix of sulfur, burnt metal, and the foul tang of the monster's breath, making each breath through his nose cloth feel like a cut in his chest. Lena knelt beside him, her crude spear upright in her right hand, her sharp eyes slicing through the tall, hunched figure of the monster, its gaunt legs, gnarled body, scythe-like malformed arms, and blazing red eyes glowing like twin fires in the haze. Torin sat close to the floor, one arm supporting Mira, the young girl breathing faintly through her useless gray filter, her breaths ragged, her pale face showing faint resolve amid exhaustion. Kalia knelt near a scrap pile by the wall, her left hand gripping her broken wooden stick, her right holding a jagged metal shard, her gaze fixed on the monster as it lumbered through the smoke, its heavy footsteps slamming the metal floor like a patient predator's pulse. The control point of Archive was now a deadly arena, where the Seraphim, the hidden controllers, had turned the trace into this beast, and survival meant facing it head-on. He pulled the Seraphim device from his bag, its red light blinking rapidly on the cold metal surface, the small screen showing a curt message, Archive, Rider, trial begins. Survive it, no other choice. The words echoed in his mind, cold and uncompromising, confirming this as the Seraphim's final test, no escape, only fight. He opened his notebook, its pages crumpled and gray, his fingers brushing the rough surface as he wrote slowly, Day 33 North, inside Gas Forge. Archive Phase 4, Monster as Trial, Weapons? He paused, his dark brown eyes narrowing through the smoke, watching the monster draw closer, unease rising like poison seeping through cracks. Survive it, he muttered, his low, hoarse voice blending with the creature's growl, but we need something stronger. He inhaled lightly through his cloth, analyzing the smoke's scents, sulfur, burnt metal, and foul tang, then glanced at the scrap pile near Kalia, realizing the broken metal rods and charred wires might be their only shot. Lena turned to him, her spear upright, her eyes flashing with resolve and strain. You see that? She asked, her voice rough, ducking lower to peer through the smoke. It's slow, but big, this spear's not enough. She frowned, her hand tightening on the spear's haft, her gaze sweeping the monster, its red eyes now closer, blazing like flames in the haze, pressing the weight of a stalking predator. Ryder nodded, kneeling by the scrap pile, his right hand grabbing a meter-long metal rod, rusted but solid, his left rummaging for a sharp black plastic shard and an old cloth coil from his bag. Not enough, but we'll make something stronger, he said, his voice low but certain, starting to craft, tying the plastic shard to the rod's end with the cloth, forming a longer spear with a sturdier tip than Lena's. This'll pierce deep, aim for its eyes or neck. He picked up a shorter metal rod, attaching another jagged shard to its head with more cloth, creating a crude mace, heavier, capable of smashing something tough. Use this if it gets too close. He scribbled fast in his notebook, long spear plus crude mace, metal plus plastic, versus monster. He turned to the group, his voice clear, we need weapons, take these, hit its weak spots. It's slow, we've got to be fast. Torin looked up, his cloudy eyes flickering with fear as the monster drew nearer, its low growl rumbling again. Weapons against that? He asked, his voice slow and shaky, his arm tightening around Mira as if to shield her from the warped figure in the smoke. Mira took a short breath, the wheezing in her throat louder, her face bone-white, her small hands trembling as she watched Ryder craft. Can I help? She whispered, her voice faint but fierce, her eyes glinting with fragile hope. Kalia ducked lower, her jagged metal shard upright in her right hand, her gaze locked on the monster, then shifting to the scrap pile. Give me the mace, she said, her voice soft but keen, reaching for the crude mace from Ryder, her hand tightening on its haft, testing its weight. It's big, but I can smash its legs, slow it down more. She took a quick breath, wincing as the smoke hit, but held her vigilance, her eyes never leaving the monster, now less than 10 meters away through the haze. Ryder frowned, rising slowly, his right hand gripping the long spear he'd made, his left passing the mace to Kalia, his eyes fixed on the monster as it advanced, its red eyes blazing through the smoke, its gaping maw exhaling a foul stench. "Target legs and eyes," he said, his voice low, analyzing quickly through the haze. The creature stood nearly 3 meters tall, its hunched body heavy, moving slow but steady, its malformed arms long and sharp like scythes. "It's strong but sluggish, we hit fast, dodge its arms." He wrote fast, "Monster, 3 m tall, slow, sharp arms, weak spots, legs, eyes." The Seraphim device buzzed hard, its red light flashing like an alarm, and the cold, deep voice crackled through the speaker, "Ryder, weapons are your choice. Survive the trial, or die in the smoke, no mercy." The voice cut off, but the monster's growl roared again, closer, paired with heavy footsteps slamming the metal floor, rippling the smoke. Ryder froze, his eyes widening, his chest tightening as the human tone struck again. The Seraphim weren't just watching, they were testing the group's survival through this beast. He turned to the group, his voice taut, "They want us to fight, use the weapons, aim true. Let's go." Lena gripped her old crude spear tighter, her eyes flashing with anger and resolve, standing and crouching, her spear aimed at the monster. "Eyes," she said, her voice low, stepping slowly through the smoke, her gaze locked on the creature's blazing red eyes, her hand poised to thrust hard. Torin pulled Mira closer, his voice trembling, "Don't let it get near." Mira looked up, her weary eyes sharp despite her frailty. "I can distract it," she whispered, her voice faint, grabbing a small metal scrap from the floor and tossing it left of the monster, the faint clang echoing through the smoke. Kalia stood, her crude mace upright in her right hand, her eyes fixed on the monster's gaunt legs. "Legs first," she said, her voice soft, crouching low, moving fast through the smoke, her hand gripping the mace's haft, ready to smash its legs. Ryder watched the monster close in, his long spear aimed straight, his eyes blazing, coordinate, Lena eyes, Kalia legs, "I'll hit the neck. Mira, keep distracting." He stepped slowly through the smoke, the creature's growl rumbling closer, but he didn't back down, the group armed with scrap-made weapons, ready to survive the trial of the dead land. Chap 49, Trade-offs in the Smoke. Ryder crouched low, his right hand gripping the long spear he'd crafted, his eyes cutting through the thick white smoke, locked on the mutant monster advancing through the gas forge's stifling air. The central machine's deep thrum rumbled behind, laced with sharp metallic whines, but now drowned by the creature's low, resonant growl, a sound vibrating through the smoke, making the square chamber tremble like a deadly arena. Dense smoke poured from pipes on the ceiling and walls, heavy with sulfur, burnt metal, and the foul tang of the monster's breath, each breath through his nose cloth like a blade slicing his chest. Lena stood beside him, her old crude spear upright in her right hand, her sharp eyes aimed at the monster's blazing red eyes, tense but resolute, her hand poised to strike. Torin knelt close to the floor, one arm supporting Mira, the young girl breathing faintly through her useless filter, her breaths ragged, her pale face showing faint resolve amid exhaustion, her left hand clutching a small metal scrap to distract. Kalia stood a few steps away, her crude mace from the last chapter upright in her right hand, her gaze fixed on the monster's gaunt legs, crouching low, ready to swing. The control point of Archive was now a battlefield, where the Seraphim, the hidden controllers, had turned this beast into a do-or-die trial, and they had to work together to survive, wielding scrap-made weapons against the hunter in the smoke. He pulled the Seraphim device from his bag, its red light blinking rapidly on the cold metal surface, the small screen showing a curt message: Archive, Writer, Survival is Victory. Trade off or die, no mercy. The words echoed in his mind, cold and emotionless, carrying a brutal choice. Survival demanded sacrifice, and the seraphim waited to see what they'd pay. He opened his notebook, its pages crumpled and gray, his fingers brushing the rough surface as he wrote slowly, Day 34 North, inside Gas Forge. Archive Phase 4, Monster, what trade-off? He paused, his dark brown eyes narrowing through the smoke, watching the monster less than 8 meters away, unease rising like poison seeping through cracks. Trade-off, he muttered, his low, hoarse voice blending with the creature's growl. What do they want us to lose to win? He inhaled lightly through his cloth, analyzing fast, nearly 3 meters tall, slow but strong, its scythe-like arms sharp, its red eyes the only clear weak spot in the haze. Lena turned to him, her spear upright, her eyes flashing with caution and resolve. You hear that? She asked, her voice rough, stepping slowly through the smoke, her spear aimed at the monster's eyes. It's closer, we strike first, but what if I miss? She frowned, taking a short breath through her cloth, wincing as the smoke hit, but holding steady, her gaze never leaving the red eyes now just meters away, blazing like fire in the dark. Ryder nodded, rising slowly, his right hand tightening on the long spear, his eyes sweeping the monster. It paused, its hunched head tilting slightly, as if sizing them up, its low growl rumbling again, vibrating the metal floor. Hit the eyes, but watch its arms, he said, his voice low but firm, sidestepping through the smoke to sync with Lena. Miss, and we lose someone, that's the trade-off they want. He scribbled fast in his notebook. Monster paused, assessing. Trade-off equals a life? He turned to the group, his voice clear, tight coordination, Lena eyes, Kalia legs, I'll hit the neck. Mira, distract. Don't let it grab anyone. Torin looked up, his cloudy eyes flickering with fear at Ryder's lose someone. Lose who? He asked, his voice slow and shaky, his arm tightening around Mira as if to shield her from the monster now steps away. Mira took a short breath, the wheezing in her throat louder, her face bone-white, but her left hand tossed another metal scrap right of the monster, the faint clang echoing through the smoke. I can turn it, she whispered, her voice faint but fierce, her weary eyes refusing to give up. Kalia darted through the smoke, her crude mace raised in her right hand, her gaze locked on the monster's left leg, gaunt but solid, like a pillar holding its heavy frame. Legs first, she said, her voice soft but sharp, lunging forward, slamming the mace into its knee. The dry crack of metal on bone rang out, the monster roared, its left leg buckling, but its right arm swung hard at Kalia, its scythe-like edge slicing through the smoke, missing her by inches. Kalia dodged back, taking a quick breath, grimacing as the smoke hit, but her eyes stayed tense, her hand gripping the mace. Ryder leapt in, his long spear aimed at the monster's neck as it buckled, the tip plunged into thick hide, tearing a long gash, black, foul blood spurting out, mingling with the smoke. The monster roared, its hunched head whipping toward him, its red eyes flaring brighter, its left arm slashing at him, the scythe edge cutting through the haze, missing his shoulder by a hair. He stepped back, his chest tightening, inhaling short through his cloth, analyzing fast. Kalia's hit slowed it, but not enough, and his strike landed but wasn't deep enough. Eyes, Lena, now, he shouted, his voice taut, turning to her. Lena charged, her crude spear thrusting at the monster's right eye, the tip struck true, piercing the blazing pupil, black blood spraying as the creature bellowed, its body staggering, its right arm flailing wildly in the smoke. But in the same instant, its left arm swept sideways, the scythe edge stabbing into Lena's shoulder, tearing through cloth and flesh, red blood spilling out, mixing with the haze. Lena fell, her left hand clutching her shoulder, her spear clattering to the floor, her eyes flashing pain but still defiant. "I got it," she hissed through gritted teeth, her voice rough. The Seraphim device buzzed hard, its red light flashing like an alarm, and the cold, deep voice crackled through the speaker, "Ryder, trade-off paid. Survive, or lose more, trial nears end." The voice cut off, but the monster's growl weakened, its body swaying, one eye blind, its left leg buckled, yet still standing. Ryder froze, his eyes widening, his chest tightening as the human tone hit again. The Seraphim had taken Lena's blood as the trade-off. He wrote quickly, his hand shaky, "Lena hit eye, wounded shoulder, trade off her?" He turned to the group, his voice taut, "Lena hit it, keep it down. Kalia, other leg." Kalia lunged again, her mace smashing the monster's right leg. A sharp crack of breaking bone echoed, it collapsed fully, roaring faintly, its body crashing to the floor. Ryder jumped in, his spear stabbing the neck again, deeper, black blood gushing as the creature thrashed, then stilled, its red eyes dimming in the smoke. Lena knelt on one knee, her hand pressing her shoulder, blood seeping through her fingers, but her gaze still burned. Torin held Mira, his voice trembling, "Is it over?" Mira looked up, her weary eyes relieved, "We lived." Ryder stared at the monster's corpse, then Lena. The trade-off was paid, but they'd survived. "Not over," he said, his voice low, "the Seraphim aren't done." The group stood in the smoke, breaths heavy, but unbroken. They'd passed, at the cost of blood.